Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's ASEAN Midday Market Watch. Our guest today is Vishnu Varathan. He's the Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank in Singapore. Vishnu, great to have you on the show again.
Always good to be here, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Now, Vishnu, before we get your insights, let's take a quick look around the region and see how markets have been performing. We'll start closer to home first with Bursa Malaysia, which is at 1,569.67. It's up 0.3%, but with heavy volume today. Now, SGX is at 2,928.63. It's up a whopping 1.3% right now. Now, across the region, it's a sea of red, unfortunately. The Nikkei is at 29,869.05. It's down 0.95%. Shanghai Composite is down 1.55% at 3,579.95. The Hang Seng is also down sharply at 1.92% at 30,045.95. ASX 200 is down 0.72% at 6,789.70. Rounding off, we've got the Kospi at 0.77% down at 3,046.33. So what's your view on what's happened in trading this morning, Vishnu?
Well, I think, generally the sea of red is what I will take away from you and continue from there. It appears two things have happened. So overnight, you had Jerome Powell, Federal Reserve Chairman, who assured markets that there will be prolonged stimulus in the US in terms of monetary policy, but he did not push back against rising UST yields, so US bond yields, suggesting that that may be a reflection of market optimism. Whilst that gave a little bit of support and rescued US markets from being in the deep red, it hasn't translated very well. So the whisperings by the Fed turned out into sweet nothings for Asia this morning. And there are two reasons for that. One is the obvious fact that he didn't hold back bond yields. So rising bond yields in the US, even though they're off the peaks, could take some wind out of Asia. So that's one consideration. And if we dig in deeper, real US Treasury yields have actually risen. They've risen by some 20 to 25 basis points since this year. And depending on how we look at it, this could start giving a sense that there could be reallocation that actually would favor the US over EM, or at least money going out of emerging Asia. And that is further reinforced by the fact that for all this talk about stimulus, the yield curve is a lot steeper. That's to say long end yields in the US are much higher than short end yields. And that has another phenomenon whereby money would much rather be parked in longer term but safer securities than indulge in risk-seeking behavior. So these are probably some of the considerations amidst the backdrop of uncertainties anyway to do with vaccines, so on and so forth.
Now, on the other side of the Atlantic, however, the ECB also seems to be rather concerned about longer-term nominal bond yields. Now, how is that going to play in European currencies and markets?
I mean, that's a good point, and that's the stark contrast. Whilst Powell said it's a reflection of market optimism, just the day before, Christine Lagarde, the ECB's president, said they are watching the evolution of long-term yields. I think her concern is that higher yields and higher long-term interest rates could dissuade and disincentivize investments. And that could then knock on to have a negative impact on growth and recovery in the Eurozone. Whilst she has said that, it is not very clear what the resolution is to this. So whether or not the ECB would either upsize its quantitative easing or go into the kind of operation twist where they buy longer end and sell the shorter end to bring down longer end yields down, or they might do Japan type of YCC, yield curve control. That's to say, draw a line in the sand and say 10-year yields shouldn't go above this and defend that level. Because they haven't suggested any indications in going towards that way resolutely, I think right now markets are undecided and would much rather play defensively than to bet aggressively on moves like that to hold down yields.
Now, looking ahead this week, what are key data points and events that investors should be looking out for?
So if we look at the global scene, we're probably looking at the G20 meeting. Probably things to look out for is to the kind of fiscal commitments that the G20 nations put forth, and any indication of coordination. These things can boost sentiments. Whether or not they bear out later, at least the initial reaction would be that. The other thing that one might look out for also is the second reading of US GDP. It's not going to be a big game changer, but it could give you an indication of where policy stimulus may lean one way or another. But like we said, not a big game changer. In Asia, I think there are two interesting things to watch. One is the Bank of Korea. So what we want to assess is how Bank of Korea deals with the recovery that's underway, but in a more uncertain scenario, what the policy options are, what the policy leanings are. Bank of Thailand could have some takeaway from that, especially in the backdrop of a weak US dollar. And the other, and the last point or the last data point that we want to watch is India's GDP. Q4 GDP is coming up for India. We want to see how the inflection is and how strong that is. But all said, the thing to take note is it is going to be very difficult to decipher a coherent theme because things are going to remain quite highly differentiated depending on where we are with vaccines as well as policy.
Vishnu, once again, thank you very much for your insights today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, we've been speaking to Vishnu Varathan, the Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank in Singapore, on BizTech's ASEAN Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out www.biztech.asia for business and technology conversation.